Hello, and welcome to an episode of Bridging the Gap podcast, where we talk about everything of bridging the gap between business, technology, and people. Today, I'm joined with Byron Sommardahl, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the communication gaps that we have between business and technology and translating that between everyone so that there's a little clearer understanding of how those things get from business needs to technology output and how that technology gets communicated back up the chain. Byron, thanks for being here.
Yeah, you got it, man. It's going to be a great topic. This is near and dear to my heart because I've spent plenty of time trying to communicate to people that didn't speak my language and didn't share my values. And so giving other people tools to be able to translate properly and really get to the crux of value is very important. So let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I know a little bit of your background because I know you've done everything from writing the code to running the company. So you've kind of been all the way up and down the stack and had to appreciate having to communicate the technological aspect, but also the requests for the technology as a leader. So just give us a little bit of an intro of your background and experience as we kind of roll up into that.
Okay, cool. So I've been a geek ever since I was old enough to play t-ball and realized that my legs, I've got a little weirdness in my legs that keeps me from being able to run full force like all the other kids. And so that little problem in my Achilles tendons kind of kept me inside a lot more than my parents really wanted. And so they bought me a computer. I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. I started taking it apart, putting it back together. It still worked miraculously. Uh, Fast forward a few years, and I got to know a friend of mine that was also kind of into computers, and he would program on his Apple IIe, and we'd come over on my on the next weekend and program the same thing on my Commodore 64, and we just go back and forth between his house and my house every weekend. We would print off the programs on like tractor feed paper, and we would refactor it. We didn't know we were doing that, but we'd refactor it all week at school and like mark things out and rewrite things by hand. And then we come back and implement what we refactored. It was just like that was my start. And I
Oh yeah.
loved programming ever since then. I spent some years thinking that I was trying to escape programming and wanted to do something else, I thought, and I just came right back to it and ended up making a career out of it. Software development was my thing for until I don't know, like the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006 ish, and I started to realize that not only can I develop software, but I can also develop people. And so I became a CTO in 2010, and that's really where my leadership journey just began to flourish, because that's when I started to kind of, I don't know, amass a small army of software developers. And
Yeah.
I loved things like TDD, and so I got to teach them TDD. And I loved things like domain-driven design, and so I got to teach them domain-driven design. And I loved Agile software development, and so I had to teach them Agile and all these great things. And I learned that programming and developing people is one of the coolest things you can possibly do. At least that's how I feel about it for me. And that's how I view my leadership journey
Yeah.
too, is working with people to help them to flourish. And so yeah, that's my little background.
Love it. I love the aspect of building up people because the more you can pour into people and the more you can invest into the people, the more you really get out of them and the more they appreciate what you're doing for them. So, I mean, again, it's not just building software. I love your term there, building people. I mean, it's great. So that being the case, covering everything from being that guy, literally hand marking up some code on the old line printer versus being a CTO. Did you ever notice or palpably feel that we'll call it that transition of I'm not the one hand on keyboard executing, but now I'm guiding and leading, and did it feel palpable and you knew you needed to change your communication styles and what you were doing?
I do. I remember it very well, and it was an abrupt change.
Mm.
It was actually kind of traumatic at the time. I didn't like it. And if you had asked me back then, if Byron, do you want to continue being a leader? By the way, it means you're going to have to stop coding. I would have said, heck no.
Yeah.
I love coding. Why would I stop doing that? Of course I can lead people and code at the same time. Um, that's preposterous. Why would I do that? So nobody really gave me that choice. I was the CTO, and my very, at the time, my very wise CEO, also friend, told me, Byron, you got to stop coding. You can't be coding on these projects. And I don't think it was because I was bad at coding. I think I was pretty good. I'm actually still pretty good at it. What I think was happening, though, was I was doing my leadership thing. I was in meetings. I was in sales meetings also, trying to woo clients. And I was just doing my CTO thing, but then I was also trying to be a part of the team and coding things, aspects of it, maybe even trying to show people how to do things when they were stuck on things. Well, I became the bottleneck. I was holding the team. It didn't matter how good I thought I was. I was the point of contact I was the point of failure that was bringing the entire team down.
Mm.
And so it was palpable. I mean, it wasn't even me choosing. I got thrown deeper into leadership than I ever realized. And I, now looking back, if you ask me now, if I would be okay with that process, then heck yeah.
Yeah.
Because it has been the right thing to do. I mean, that decision to tell me to stop coding, it was right. It was the thing that we needed at the time. And I needed that as a leader too. I needed to be able to focus on leadership and developing people.
Yeah.
And I just needed that push.
Well, and you and I go back a few years, so I obviously have a little more of end up in this, and they're sitting there going like, I don't know when I ended up in this managerial role versus I'm not the individual contributor anymore. So the fact that you have a clear line of individual contributor anymore. So I remember my clear line. It's, you got to learn from that to wait, you mean I got to lead people? Oh no, that's not what my skill set is. But I say that because as you've been building people, and I know a little bit of what you do with your day-to-day work and building up people, talking about this communication skill between business and technology teams and how that does get translated, because as you say, we're not always speaking the same proverbial language. Did you, for you yourself, was there a training, or were you training on the job, or was this schooling of like moving from the maybe say computer science aspect to business leadership aspect, because you start learning a new dialogue and a new vocabulary? Was that formal or was it informal and you just were learning it on the fly?
Definitely not a formal training. In fact, I don't even know if they teach this kind of stuff formally. Like, I don't have an MBA, so I don't know. I didn't go through that process, so I don't know if this is something that they teach. But it is definitely something that I came across over time. So I've been reading books ever since I started the CTO role. I was convinced early on that I needed to be reading constantly because I needed that crash course in leadership. I was a software developer. I was a geek. I would rather be in a dark room coding by myself, not dealing with people, And now at this point in my life, I have a deep love and appreciation for people. I want to be around people. I want to work with people. So that's my thing now. But before, as a developer, I was kind of in a little cocoon or a hole of I just want to do my own thing, like I guess stereotypical developer. When I came out of that and got into the CTO role, I had to educate myself. I had to start reading and consuming everybody else's thoughts and ideas to figure out what in the world I'm supposed to do as a CTO. So I came into contact with something along the way that really changed how I see business versus tech communication. And this is not something that came specifically from a book. It came from a friend of mine, Tommy Norman. He probably read a book,
Mhm.
and he found this
Yep.
thing called the value framework, great name, by this company called Black Swan Farming. And I don't even know if they coined it in the first place. It's just super, super simple. I don't know who came up with it. It might be
Yeah.
like some sort of like ancient Chinese philosopher, but you can basically, according to this framework,
Yeah.
you can classify value into one of four buckets. Value is going to do one of four things. It's going to, let me see if I can remember it. There's like a quadrant in my mind. It's either going to create value, or it's going to, sorry, revenue. Okay. It's either going to create revenue, or it's going to protect revenue.
Mhm.
Those are the top two, I think, top two in the quadrant. And then maybe
Wow.
when we post edit this show, you could put up a actually, I should probably do that right now so I'm not misquoting anything. Black
Yeah.
Swan Farming Value Framework. Well, they don't show it in a quadrant.
Okay.
Okay, but I can still at least say it more correctly. Okay, yeah. It, I do a course and I put it in a quadrant
Okay.
in the course. I got
Yeah.
nice little icons and stuff. So according to the value framework from Black Swan Farming, value is going to do one of four things. It's going to increase revenue. It's going to protect revenue. It's going to reduce costs, or it's going to avoid costs. So I learned this framework, and it helped me to begin empathizing with the people on the business side of the house, the people that don't have the technical background to be able to speak the lingo and to follow your
Hmm.
line of reasoning that is maybe very
Hmm.
technically influenced. So
Okay.
when you start to have empathy for those people on the non-technical side, then and you want to get your message across to them, you need to translate. You need to go through some sort of filter layer so that people can understand what in the world you're talking about. And so that's why I love this framework. It's just four simple things: increase revenue, protect revenue, reduce costs, avoid costs. And when I became the check writer, right, when I became the person who's paying for uh, software
Okay.
projects or whatever projects, when I became the person also that has to defend the decisions of the team to a client that is writing the checks, then all of a sudden I have no choice. I have to grow the empathy muscle, and I have to grow that part
Hmm.
of my brain, and to start to think the way they think. And so a framework like this really helps an old tech person like me to
Hmm.
start to speak in ways that make sense to them.
I love that because I remember when I became a CTO and I very jadedly assumed my job was just technical. I'm CTO. I'm the technical officer, so surely all I'm doing is technical stuff. Until I ran into a book. Patrick Lencioni was talking about having the team of one, or sorry, not the team of one, team number one. And in my mind, I mean, when I read the book and my initial interpretation of it was, well, then team number one is my
Yeah.
team. But then I had to step back and take a little bit of acknowledgement of, wait a minute, my team is not team number one. They're team number two. Team number one is the team I'm on, which is now the new people that I'm sitting around the table with. So as a CTO, the other executives and VPs and whatever the case may be. And so I had to pivot my thinking on going, it's not really allegiances and alliances, but going like, well, who am I really here to make sure I'm aligned with initially? And it's my team number one. It's my new peers, which meant, to your point, I love the value system on that because a lot of it is obviously, I've said it this way many times to many clients. If we're not making or saving you money, we probably shouldn't do it. So probably a gross oversimplification of that value framework, but I mean, same general principles. But it did mean I had to start learning a different dialogue in addition to that. And I like what you're talking there of like financials and revenue, because that is obviously what keeps a company afloat. But let's go one layer deeper. As you're talking about technology and the business, I mean, the business isn't just revenue decisions, because people are sitting around and they've got their desires and their opinions and their hypotheses of what's going to grow the business, hopeful outcome being making or saving money. But let's say you're talking with your CTO, talking with the CMO. I mean, their whole job is about spending money on ads more often than not. So, I mean, they're really trying to get that really done, but they need to still be aligned with you. How much else did you have to dig into and learn new dialogue with the rest of the team? There you
I
go.
mean, it's hard to track. Again, I don't have the MBA that I think a lot of my counterparts out there have. So I don't know whether I have equivalent knowledge and training at this point or experience. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I could. But like talking with a CMO, I still have to ask them, what are you trying to do? And I have to think like reverse engineer and think about how I can help them without having a lot of experience in that area. And so like a CMO, if I as a
Mm-hmm.
programmer or my team has this thing they want to do, then as the kind of like the liaison between the CMO and the team, I'm probably going to have to say, okay, so you all want to
Yep.
do this
Yep.
from,
Yep.
like, is it going to prevent his audience from dying out? Is it going to prevent his one of his networks from dropping him because he spammed too much? Is it going to reduce his costs in some way? Like you just mentioned, ad spend. Is what you're doing going to somehow translate to it makes his ads more efficient so he
Yep.
can buy less ads? So that he could, or is it going to avoid costs? Like, is there some sort of compliance risk or tax thing that, or some rule that if the CMO breaks, that it's going to cause this big bill to fall on the business? So does the fixing your technical debt have anything to do with any of those things? If it doesn't, then it's extremely hard to take something to a CMO or somebody else in the business and say, okay, we want to spend like 3 months rewriting something because it makes the developers feel better. If we can't funnel it through honestly through one of these four value representations, one of these buckets, it's going to be a really, really hard ask.
Do you find that to be more of the framework you use of prioritizing? Ask that because it'll segue to a question in a moment that we'll come to on those interactions and those communications. I can see this, but if you're taking everything through a revenue value driven framework to a revenue value driven frame, what if they have two equal priorities? Are you participating to back to this translation of going, you're the CTO, you're the technical person, you're the technical strategist to go, what if we do this versus this? So you're participating in it in a little deeper layer. So is that framework you're pushing things through a prioritization thing, or is it how you're thinking about what you would do to translate it back down to your team as well? Which is still a bit prioritization, but
So does it have to be one or the other, or is it okay for it to be both?
yeah, I, I'll pose it this way. So if you've got a revenue-driven value framework for the business, and as you're communicating with your peers at an executive level, I can totally appreciate why that framework works well on helping them think through it. But are you using it more as a strategic tool to get prioritization versus necessarily bridging that gap of the communication of the business need to the technology need? Because that ends up having a palpable thing as this technical person to say, you have to bring back up the alternatives and the what ifs and the gotchas, that good old SWOT analysis of But if you want to do that, here's your ramifications. If you do this, here's that stepping stone. Is it always revenue driven, or do you bring other things in here for that business translation? Sure.
All right. All right. All right. I agree. I agree. So I definitely would. I recommend to people all the time to use this as a way to prioritize, or at least an input into your priorities. Now, my example of the CMO is probably only valid like if the CMO is really in charge of that dev team. I guess the CMO's dev team, which means the CMO is the boss of that. And so if you are wanting to do something, it needs to benefit the CMO. He's the one that you report to. And if the CMO says, "Well, I really want the whole business to benefit from whatever we do," then that's the CMO's prerogative, and the CMO can say, "Okay, let's look at the value to the rest of the business." But in a lot of cases, the CMO is trying to make sure that his or her own dev team is benefiting their area. Now, if you've got a dev team that is a general dev team that works with the whole company, then they might work for the CTO, and at that point, the CTO is really representing the entire company, not just marketing, sales, or operations, but it's like the whole thing. So, and that was my position a lot of times. So the priority side of it came from, okay, this might not benefit that department directly. So my value framework, I might not be able to find a way to justify value to that department over there, but it sure doesn't benefit that one over there. And for example, technical debt, again, if you've got this bubble of technical debt and the devs are wanting to fix it, and your company maybe has this history of losing developers because your code base is a pile of crap, and you just can't hang on to developers. Retention is, yeah, right. I hope it happens less and less, but it still happens a lot. I get called into code bases all the time, and I have to wade through the crap to try to get to what's actually going on. But if like developer happiness is a really big important thing, and it's not that we need to treat them like prima donnas and little fragile princesses that we have to spoon feed everything, but it's a real thing. I mean, if you ask these people, very well educated, smart people, to come in and work on this code base, and it really is just a torturous, murderous, dragon-filled pit of horribleness. Like I'm running out of adjectives, but that right there will cause people to stop wanting to come to work. And so developers are expensive. Their onboarding is expensive. You want to retain them. And so that's, again, go back to the value framework. That's reducing costs or avoiding costs of having to rehire and retrain and all the risk that comes with that. So that you can make a case to fix the technical debt that the same developers created in order to retain them. So if you can make that case, then you might be able to, I mean, I don't know, the developers might be able to make a strong case to the check writers to say, look, this is going to prevent you from being able to innovate in the future because your code base sucks so bad that no developers are going to want to work on it. And it's because, and if you run it through the right value framework, then
well, you might get I think you touch on something there that I would argue is not even necessarily a tech department problem, but I'm going to separate it between the managerial group versus the individual contributor group. I think anywhere you put an individual contributor into chaos, they should have a little bit of a siloing, another conversation for another day of silo versus halo and working. But I do think the individual contributor should be allowed to be siloed a bit to do that contribution in as much of an uninterrupted flow state as we can. So there is a bit of protecting. That's why we kind of always say the sprint is sacred, and we want to, separate the people. You don't just come in here and interrupt things, because we want to complete the thing we did. They want to contribute. But to your exact point, I don't think this even matters if it's a developer, a designer, a copywriter, I think if you're giving them a chaotic, messy environment in whatever situation, you don't get the best work out of that individual contributor because they're spending more time wading through the proverbial crap than actually contributing value. So I do think it's a great point. I mean, technical, I think we feel it very palpably when we talk about technical debt, but I think that's true across an organization, which is why I would say we'll keep it on the technical aspect here and how it correlates. And I do want to pivot in one other moment because I know you have experience in this other area, but as a CTO at a company, so if you're a generic dev team, let me say general dev team, and you're the CTO, I mean, your job, saying this because I've been at this seat, your job is to ensure that there is technical alignment with the organization, no one department, because I can't favor the product team over the marketing team or the finance team or whatever. Like we don't play favorites, which is an interesting reason why I mentioned that. Do you typically run it always through that value framework for the revenue aspect to go, product team wants to do this, it's going to make, save, or whatever money. Marketing team wants to do this. Marketing team can't do that if the tech team doesn't do this. I mean, you end up with this give and take. And it's a bit of why I kind of go back to that dialogue question of you have to learn to speak a different speak. I can't come in here and go tech debt, code coverage. Like they don't know what I'm talking about. Not enough unit test. Like that's not a language that those people are interpreting. That's that technical language we have. But you've got to bring the reason those things have piled up and have value to be fixed or maintained or whatever the case is to the team. So you find that you do have that new vocabulary. I think that's very true. And I say that because as a CTO at the company, I think that's very palpable. The pivot I would put on this is, and you've done this, what about when you're I won't even call it the CTO. Let's call it a technical strategist or a leader in more of a client consultant kind of basis where you're working with multiple and you have multiple disparate things. This a little bit pivots from direct business to technical communication. But in my opinion, I'm going to say this exacerbates because now you're having multiple teams, multiple clients, levels of sophistication. How do you, with the company you're running, because I know this is a lot closer to a multiple things touching, like how do you keep this in alignment of building up the team? I often say it's those soft skills that are the harder skills to implement because you're a programmer, awesome, but can you communicate? Do you have empathy? Like those kind of things. But how do you help the team, especially when we're talking client and they may be pivoting multiple clients over the course of time and all that? Like, how do you help them get back and forth within that technical to business where you may not, I mean, if you're owning the company, you may not be the one being that buffer. And they have a team who they're now kind of allocated to the client. How do you help with that?
Well, I can't say that I've got that one in the bag, but I can tell you that every one of my developers learns about this value framework because and QA and anybody else on the team, designers even, like the individual contributors on your team need to understand and have empathy for how people need to be communicated with. They need to understand that there is a difference. There's a gap a lot of times between how people are motivated, how people end and start their day, and why they come to work. They need to have that kind of empathy so that they can communicate effectively. Because if they don't, then their words will be lost or ignored, and that doesn't feel good. So my team always gets, as part of their onboarding, gets a refresher or an introduction to this black swan farming value framework. So that because it's so simple and it's kind of easy to memorize, so they learn about it, and then we encourage them to utilize this in their communications on a daily basis. And also, you mentioned prioritization for our ICs. It might just be a mental prioritization. Like, how do I classify this this argument I want to make? How do I classify this thing I want to defend? And how important is it
Yeah.
Does it really really ding against one of these value items? Does it really increase revenue? Does it protect revenue, reduce costs? Does it avoid costs? If it doesn't do one of those things, is it really worth defending? Is it really worth arguing about? And so by bringing that up and encouraging them to think through this, it helps them to grow a little bit that they need, because you're right. I can't be there.
Yep.
In fact, the way I've designed our company,
Yep.
I am intentionally not there because I know that I don't scale. I don't scale unless I can teach
Right.
people to maybe think like me in some ways. So that's why I'll give them this framework that I stumbled upon with the help of Tommy Norman years ago.
Well, it's that wonderful parable of, you can either give a man a fish or you can teach him to fish. So, I mean, yeah, you could be there and hold their hand and be that buffer, or you can teach them to build this skill and flex that muscle. And you said the another word that I got to be honest, it took me intentional, rigorous intentionality of building that empathetic muscle, because I was not an empathetic person earlier on in my career. And I do blame that on a transition of going from individual contributor, you want to be that rock star, to wait a minute, I want to groom and create rock stars. Well, how do I do that? So it definitely took some empathy. I think that could be an episode in of itself. Speaking of this value framework, I actually have a curiosity, because I can almost see this being borderline an ideology or philosophy. Just for curiosity, do you take that into your personal life too? Like, is it that meaningful to you that you think about that even in your personal life?
That might be taking
Or does
a
it
little
feel like it's really a work?
far. I don't know. I think I have it at least a few times.
Yeah.
Not super intentionally. I can see the value of it. I mean,
Yeah.
just being able to talk through things with my wife, with my kids, I'm sure that it would have some impact, and it probably does have some impact, like just without me noticing, because
Yeah.
I've been breathing this framework for so many years that I guess inadvertently it could be affecting how I communicate. The main idea, though, and what definitely does happen on a daily basis, and should for all of us, is that I have my own set of values, my own motivations, the things that wake me up and get me to work every morning. You have a
Yep.
different set of values. You have whatever you've got going on your side that is forming how you listen and how you hear things, how things hit you when they're said. Uh, if I don't take a little bit of time to consider how things are hitting your ears, then I'm at risk of losing, wasting my time. My words might get lost on you, and then not only do you lose because maybe what I was going to say was important, but I also lose because I didn't have a voice. I gave up my voice because I didn't pay attention. Same thing is true for my family. If I don't, if I talk to my 5-year-old like she's 50, and I use big words, and I talk about things from an experience of a 50-year-old, and I don't try to, I don't want to say dumb down, but I don't try to come to her level and speak to her
To
where
her
I'm
level, I was going to say, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, then I lose and she loses, and we lost also together. We lost an opportunity to build a relationship. So
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here. Developers or tech team and business being able to build relationship and get things done and be productive and have a great time doing it because they take the time to consider the other person,
Yeah.
how they hear things, and how they need to be communicated with. I'll give you another example. I am fluent in Spanish. Y si
Hmm.
ahorita le hablo en español, usted no va a entender nada. Quizás the people that were listening to me right now and that speak Spanish, maybe they were understanding what I was saying. But if I'm speaking a different language to you, and I just keep on going and going and going and going, and you just kind of, be respectful and you wait until I'm finished, and uh, all that time that I spent was wasted because you didn't
Yeah.
understand what I was saying. And we've got to do that as a business, like the check writers. We need to consider what we're saying to our tech teams tech team needs to consider how they're speaking to the tech writers, so that we can all flourish together, so that we can make cool things, so we can solve really really great problems.
I hoped. I'm glad you did it. I didn't want to prompt it or segue it. I hoped we would somehow touch on the Spanish aspect of this, not because of Spanish, but because I wanted to touch on the fact that we said translations and language. There's this obvious. Well, we're talking about different, business jargon, technical jargon. I've got my acronyms, you have your acronyms, and so we're talking language. I want to broaden it one last bit and talk about this, because I do think that is different language. We're saying words to each other that I don't know what you mean. When you give me acronyms that are special to your area of expertise and I don't know them, I might as well be speaking another literal language. But I do also want to touch on literal languages, because I have a multicultural company myself. We've got a team in the Netherlands, India, Spain, Honduras, some in South America, I think in Colombia or Ecuador. I mean, like we're all over, some of which thanks to you. I tell my team all the time, and I mean, I'm horrible at it. I would never, ever tell them, I'm like, oh, I'm fluent in this, but man, I'm going to touch it on at this point. I'm at least taking the intentional initiative to learn some of their language. And it may not even end up that we're conversing in said language, whether it's Dutch or Spanish. We'll just pick on these two for the moment. But what I do find that it helps, and you mentioned empathy, and I think that is such a powerful part, and I'm going to tie this to the empathy. My desire to learn as much Spanish and as much Dutch as I can. I should practice it more to be spoken fluent, but at least I'm listening and reading what that benefits. Two things, and I tell this to my team all the time as well. Just about everybody on my team, English is not their first language. They're all fluent, but two things happen, and it happens with anyone listening to another language that's not their native. I get to speaking fast, even though it's English, and they're not catching up on every word. Same principle of when I'm listening to native, Spanish speakers. Oh, you're talking so fast. I'm like, no, you're just talking conversationally, because I'm not translating every word. We're just having a conversation. Empathy led me to believe, tell them, because again, Dutch, Spanish, English, we chose English because we all spoke English to be the language. But when we're speaking English, everybody has the right to go slow down, back up, repeat, because to your point, there's empathy, but not only that, I need them to understand. I don't want feigned head nods of going, you know what I said. I don't need you to hear the words. I need you to understand the meaning.
Yeah.
Which I take that to the learning the languages, even though I may not be speaking it, there's a certain intentionality of going, well, when they hit a English stumbling block, I tell them both. Well, take a stab at the word in your native language if it's because what they're doing is trying to translate their native language to English.
Yeah.
I say, well, take a stab at it in your native. Maybe I know the word. Granted, we're not conversing that way, but I want to give them the opportunity to go, I want you to be able to communicate the meaning, not get hung up on the translation. So I do think that empathy and that language thing, whether it is literal different regional languages or departmental languages, there is a certain empathy that has to go both ways. I can't come over here as the tech guy and talk about GCP and AWS, and I got this RBAC thing I got to figure out. Like, I can't start throwing out acronyms and talk about my Lambdas and Kubernetes, and like they're going, huh? I mean, my chief marketing officer has no clue what we're talking about. But only by way of experience do I understand when they're telling me about LTV and CAC and the CPCs and all these other things, because they're throwing out their jargon and their acronyms. But we have to understand, when I'm like, whoa, but you have to have that empathy. I would go so far, and it's, I think, hard for new people coming into a role to know that if you have a good culture and a good company, there's also the ability to have vulnerability to go like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, maybe I just don't know that acronym, so please tell me the acronym. Because everybody gets into their rhythm, whether it's conversations of two Spanish speakers and I'm trying to listen in, but I can't follow their rhythm. It's too fast for me because I don't do it all the time. It's the same problem if two marketers are talking, but they got a tech problem, and I'm like, hey, what were all those 17 things you just said that I didn't follow? So like it takes that intentionality, but the vulnerability of being like, I got questions, because otherwise business communications and the translations, and again, this is all really for our sake of the podcast, it's technical, but I don't think it matters departmentally or regionally. You have to lean into going, I may not speak your speak, so give me grace.
I think we all need three things. We need empathy, we need courage, and we need to
Mm,
give forgiveness. So no
mm,
matter who we are in whatever department, we're going to have acronyms because it's the easiest
mm,
way to communicate something. You can pack like a chapter of meaning into one little acronym. Just like a picture is worth 1,000 words, an acronym is worth at least 20. And so you
right.
can you can communicate so well with that, but then other people in other departments don't have that acronym. Well, I mean, you go over into a meeting and you're talking, you're communicating and explaining things, defending something, and you throw out that acronym. Okay, you need to have empathy for everybody else in the meeting. They may not know what your empathy, they may not know what your acronym stands for, what it means. They may not have the chapter of meaning in their context. They need courage. They need courage to ask you, what do you mean by that acronym? What did that mean? What is RDP? Then you give forgiveness. You need to be gracious towards other people when they don't understand things. So we kind of need all three of these things to be able to function as a team, whether you're in the leadership or the contributor side or whatever department. We need empathy, courage, and to give forgiveness. I'm fluent in Spanish, but I'm not perfect. And I constantly have to ask for forgiveness because maybe I forgot a word or I didn't use a word correct. My
Yeah.
accent's too thick or something like that. And so I need to ask for forgiveness. They need to have empathy and they need to have
Right.
forgiveness for me. And I need to just have courage to throw things out there. And also as a tech team, I need to have empathy for the people,
Yep.
the check writers, I call them, on the other side, that they are going to have a different language. I need to remember that RDP for me means something maybe completely different to
Yeah.
what they mean when they think of RDP. Maybe it has a different, it's just three letters. It could be anything on the other side of the wall. So we've got to have all three of these things to really be able to communicate properly and have a great team.
I think that's so true. And I love the fact that you bring up that, especially if we start talking about acronyms in the business world, because it's rife with acronyms all over the place. And I mean, I would argue it's going to end up being inevitable that I'm going to have an acronym, that you're going to have well, not you and I, were tech, but me and the other executive, we're going to end up with acronyms that may be the same acronyms. And to your point, they're different things. And I think the courage one is a really great one to bring up, of like, well, I'm going to add two things: courage, along with do not make assumptions. If I'm the CFO and I'm the CTO and we've got them having a conversation and there's a shared acronym, neither of us should be, maybe this is the courage with the assumption of like, we should not be assuming your acronym means my acronym, because if it meant something to me, but it didn't mean that same thing to you, but we're going, yeah, we're not aligned. we're swinging a miss over here. Like, oh, it was that. Like, yeah. So that is another point of the courage and lack of assumptions and leaning in. I tell many a person, and it really doesn't matter if you're a leader or you're the most junior person on the team, ask the question. I don't care if you think it's a dumb question. Ask the question, because I would much rather answer what maybe everyone in the team had a jaded response, but make sure you have clarity, than you to operate on
Right.
an assumption and find out later it was wrong. So I do like the, like I said, the grace, the courage, and the empathy, but it's a two-way street. It's not just I need to embody that, we need to embody that. Well, We're at about a 48 minute here. Any passing parts of wisdom as we close up? Anything you want to bestow to us as we're
Wisdom.
communicating technology and business needs back and
This is
forth?
my chance. This is my big opportunity. I was
All
going to
your
ask you the
sage
same
wisdom and
thing.
advice.
I mean, I would just. This is not even on the
Yeah,
lives and a
putting you
great
on the
majority
spot.
of the time that they spend during the day. I mean, we spend a lot of times as leaders more time with our people than their own spouse and kids, and so to me that is a huge responsibility to be a part of their lives in a way that
Yeah,
helps them to flourish. So if I get the if I get the big opportunity to share some sage wisdom with people, I would say if you're a leader and you're not in it to help people flourish, then move over and let somebody else, or figure out how to grow that part of your leadership muscles, and you'll be better because of it. Everybody will be.
I love it. Yeah, I I think that's hard to say. Truer words have been spoken. If you're not leaning into that, and that's not really an area you want to grow, get out of the way,
Yeah.
or learn to flex that muscle. And it may be uncomfortable, but if you don't learn it, you're not, in my argument, you're not leading.
Yeah.
So,
All right, let's do it. See ya.
all right, Byron.